Okay, so one of the things that we do with Ortelius and DeployHub is we view the world in a set of domains. And the reason why we do that is in the microservices world, you want to categorize together like microservices that are specific to email or the ads, for example. This can also be used for security. So we could create a domain, let's say we have something around single sign-on, could be something that's part of the application. So we give a single sign-on or a security domain. And this will allow us to have developers that are working like on single sign-on, that development team to be able to make changes and other teams get to consume those. So basically they'll set up like a read-only view of the single sign-on. And what this does, it helps with the collaboration of the services to prevent duplication, because one of the things that you'll see is you get a lot of, you'll end up getting this sprawl and duplication, which you'll end up having to fix the same bug or the same security issue in multiple places. And that's one of the things that we strive to help minimize is the number of, how much sprawl you get out there. Now you'll see what we'll have is what we call an application. And an application is going to be a collection of components. And let me get into this one. Go to components. And this is all the different services that make up the application. Sometimes people think of an application as a product, but basically it's a set of components that are used to make the application run. Now the components can be anything from microservices. So this could be the card service, could be microservice. The front end may be still a monolith that's, Tomcats that's been shoved into a 2 gigabyte Docker container. The email service may be a Lambda function, for example. It doesn't really matter the size of the components, but the important part is the relationships of how these components and the versions of the components relate up to a version of the application. So one of the things you want to be able to do is when we look at what's running where, you want to be able to this one, I'm going to jump over to the other. We want to be able to see which versions have been deployed where. So we look, because of DeployHub and Ortelius are looking at the view of the software from such a high level, we're looking across all the different clusters, all the different environments, seeing what's coming down the pipeline and those type of views into the data. So this one here, we can see that version 10 was made it out to the Hipster store cluster, and the older version 9.1 was deployed at some point to these 3 different clusters, including AWS. So this gives us a view of where things are in the pipeline, because when you're talking security, you want to start catching these things, especially like application level security early on, how well the container was built, what's in the container, are there any CVEs and those type of things. So we'll come back to applications, but we're going to go take a dive into the components. And the components, like I said, can be pretty much anything. The ones we're going to look at today are going to be a couple Docker components. So look at the ad service here. And every time a developer or your pipeline process is set up and you do your final build. So this is going to be our build that we're going to go with, that we're going to move out of the developer's world. We're going to pick a release candidate. This build is going to then go into QA, and then it may go into staging and user acceptance test, and then production, for example. It may be part of that pipeline. But every time that we do that type of build, we're going to create a new version of the component and keep track of that. And the reason why we do this is because what's running in production, what's running in QA, and what's running in development are going to be different. Now, when we do that build, we hook into the CI/CD pipeline, and we want to grab information about what's happening in the pipeline level. So we'll go in and grab like the README file from the repo that the code's being built from. If there's any open API or Swagger. The reason why this is important is we can track changes of your endpoints over time. Some of the other things, if you are doing some security scanning, in this case, we were using CycloneDX for Python and safety, because this Docker container is a Python fast API, that we are able to go ahead and pull out the CVEs that were found. And these are just hyperlinks over to the CVE details at that level. So you can, and this information, this list of CVEs, is stored with this version of the application. So like I said, every time the developers decide that this is the build that they want, we're going to go through and pick up that CVE information. We are not a scanning tool. We rely on other tools to provide us the information. But what we're going to do is consolidate it into a single location for you. Now, because we're keeping track of all this version information and the CVEs are part of that, we can actually see the progression of how the services are improving or getting worse based on their vulnerabilities. At the same level, we're going to be looking at any license consumption that is available. What are all the different licenses that the different packages are being consumed under. Again, you can just click on these. You can go over to SPDX and get the information about the license. This is important to the lawyers. You want to make sure you don't have any license that could cause you to have to give away all your source code for some reason. So, and then if you have any key value pairs can affect how an application is running. So that is, we keep track of the key value pairs, basically the config maps at the component level or at the application level and the environment level. Again, we have the license that this microservice is being released under. And then we know what are all the consuming applications. Everything that we do is audited. So there's going to be a full audit trail. If anybody, like I changed attributes a while ago, that's all part of the audit history. And also, like I was saying about who can view and change, this is where we set up the permissions model. It's group-based roles, basically, who can do what to this component. So within Ortelius and DeployHub, you have security basically around every single object, different levels of access that can be utilized. And then also you can associate any change requests. Those are like Jira tickets or GitHub issues against the component itself. And then finally we have, if this service breaks, or if we have something wrong with it, what are all the application teams that we need to go talk to, and which versions of the application that are affected. So if you're looking like at the Equifax security hack, where they had a open source library and they knew they had to get it fixed, but they didn't know who was using it. This is where we give you that information to say we need to go talk to all these application teams to make sure that they get on board with the new changes. What we've been doing is you can look at the API endpoints. So one of the things that we can utilize is so we're going to look at these two boxes here, the providing API endpoints and the consuming API endpoints. So in this case, this service validate user is providing one API endpoint around a GET RESTful API, which is called validate user. Now we've implemented this also for pub sub type of implementations as well, where they're called topics that you subscribe to and publish. So what we can see here is this single microservice, and this information that we grabbed that came out of the Swagger for the service, and we recognize that it didn't didn't consume any endpoints. So it's kind of like at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, if we go back over to one of our other components, go over to the dependency package, we'll see here that this one is going to consume the validate user. And because we know that it's going to consume it, we can actually look at which version of the component it's consuming. There will actually be, if the API endpoint doesn't change, you'll get multiple components, multiple components producing the same endpoint. So we'll get different versions of the same endpoint that we're going to be associated together. Now, in this case, we're going to produce two separate endpoints as part of this process. So if we go up to the application layer and we look at the mapping of it, we don't have a lot of data in this, but you can get the idea where we're going to be able to see what we're producing. So the dep package is consuming one endpoint and producing multiple endpoints. Same with like the validate user is consuming and producing. So what we do is we will give you the information from any viewpoint. So if you're looking at it from an environment viewpoint, from more like SRE or operations side of the house, we can take two different environments, compare them. You can look at the differences between the two environments. So we can see that between our CI/CD pipeline, we have the old version or a newer version of the Labor Day sale running, and here's an older version running. And these are the components that are different. Everything else is the same between the two environments. So you can look at it from the SRE point of view. You can look at it from the application viewpoint. So I want to say, what's the difference between the base version and the latest version? You can look at it that way. And then you could also, so here we can see what's changing as part of this process. Now, some of the things that we're in the process of adding in these comparison reports are all those like what are the CVEs and the differences between the number of CVEs and licenses between the different versions at that point. So you'll be able to get a really deep dive into your data and understand what's happening at that level. Now, if we want to bring in, like I said, the Swagger information and the relationships, and build out difference reports around the relationships of comparing like one cluster and all the service-to-service relationships. That's something we still have to do, but it is on our roadmap.